So obviously there was a long period of time. You were 5 years on heroin before you ended up getting onto methadone, and that's what allowed you eventually to get off.
Yeah.
So tell me about the journey from being a sex worker, and a heroin addict to where you are now. Obviously there's many chapters in that, but just in those early days of your whole identity, I mean, there must have been so many different emotions, but how much was shame a factor in there?
You mean after I finished everything then?
Actually, as you made those decisions to
Yes, shame. It's a funny thing. I found that shame was something, a luxury I couldn't afford. As I worked in the brothels, I got to save a little bit of money, so I started splashing out on a whole lot of luxuries. Actually, I had lipstick and pretty clothes and all these things that I was also doing drugs, so I don't know what I was up to, but they were treats to myself.
Yeah.
But shame I could never afford, because if you begin to feel shamed by these things, you will destroy yourself.
Right.
And in the first place, I didn't think that being a heroin user was something to be ashamed of. I saw it as something that I had done, and it was a malady, if you like. It was a kind of an affliction that I had, and I certainly didn't go into it thinking I was going to be in all this trouble. I know that I made the decisions that took me there, so I'm not saying it wasn't my fault, but I guess I thought I'm like an ill person, I'm like someone who somehow got ill, and I was suffering. Like, why should that make me ashamed? I wasn't doing anything bad. I wasn't stealing from people very much. I've got to say, I did steal from people a little bit, and that was what I did feel shame about. But my experience of that was that I felt so physically ill every time I thought about it, and still to this day when I think about stealing the money from my bookshop, to this day I just feel that like vomiting when I think about it. So that I realised was...
So you had a sense of morality around it, because you said, I could never be someone that robbed handbags from little old ladies.
Yeah.
But you could sell your body.
Yeah.
One was really wrong, and the other was... You could justify that.
Yeah, well, listen, I stole money from the bookshop, but I actually had always intended to pay it back.
Yeah.
It was never going to be stealing. So, like, this is the morality I had. I was borrowing it, I will put it back. And so sex work was, I wasn't going to be taking it from anyone. I mean, it's a victimless kind of situation. And in fact, what I found was that I hadn't expected that I was helping people. And I was helping myself in some ways, and I was also making my clients feel good and proud. And the more I worked in professional sex work, especially in brothels, the more pride I took in all of that. So the morality of sex work, I don't think is that complicated. Mostly, I think it's a pretty moral thing to do, actually.
Actually, which you said earlier, you have a lot of good things to say about sex work, and obviously there's enormous judgment on women who sell their bodies for sex, or so tell me about that, because it's an interesting one. There's so many perspectives, and people can often be very, very righteous about it.
Yes.
And it's easy for people to be righteous if they've never been in a situation where they've felt forced into it.
Yes.
But ultimately, women in Australia generally get a choice. In some parts of the world, they don't. So just tell me about what are the positive things you have to say about sex work?
Okay. First of all, I guess we have a tendency, especially people who have not come in contact with sex work per se, to think of it as an identity, not a job. So sex workers are people who are kind of somehow born to be sex workers. They're promiscuous, they're irresponsible, they're degraded, they're victims.
They're less than us.
They're less than us. That's their identity, not mothers, daughters, teachers, scholars, whatever. And I think sex work is very much an occupation. You don't do it for fun. You do it for money. You do it because, like any other job, you do it because it suits your life at that moment and the needs you have. And also, I think people underestimate the amount of professional pride and the structure of it. The fact that in most of Australia it's decriminalised.
Yeah,
so
and I saw that you were very proud. Of what you did, and your client list and all of that thing.
Oh, look, I could probably get distracted and go on about it for ages, but basically. There are all sorts of parts of sex work, so like the legal profession, or like politics, or like, mechanics, car mechanics. There are good ones, bad ones, great places to work, bad places to work, people. It's not a flattening kind of thing. It's actually full of human beings, And so there are great bits about sex work where people are very well respected and everyone's happy and they go home rich and content, and you get a lot of showers, so you're very clean. But there are other parts which are really shady and exploitative and nasty for some people.
Yeah.
But I have a very strong belief that the more people accept that sex work is in our society and is all around us, and in fact involves lots of people that we probably know, the less we're able to treat people who work in that industry badly, and that includes the clients who disrespect the women who have to lie about what they do to everyone else, the women who are murdered or attacked, you know, in the course of their work. Even, I mean, I worked on the street, we had people go around throwing eggs at us, which is so pointless and boring. But it was just a mark that people thought that we somehow had deserved it.
Well, I think it's human nature. We all like to think we're above somebody.
Yeah.
And the people that throw eggs,
well,
I mean, it tells you that they have a dire need to prove they're above somebody. Like, we're better than
but
you.
all it proves is that they're not.
No, it absolutely says so much more about them.
Just imagine them going off into the 7-Eleven and buying the damn eggs and all
this.
Well,
it speaks to a level of, you know, evolution in their own, in who they are. I couldn't agree with you more on that one.
And look, I suppose sex work is troubling. It's a troubling element in the society that we live in, because what we don't want to think about is that it's our daughters and our wives and our girlfriends and our aunties and cousins and everyone who work in it, and it's our brothers, husbands, you know, sons who go and use the services. And we don't like to think that. I can tell you that it's actually just the regular guy in the street. It's not a whole lot of sleazebags. There are sleazebags. It's not a whole lot of rich, you know, kind of business guys. There are rich business guys, but most of the people in it are completely normal.
Yeah.
You see them at Chadstone Shopping Centre. That's what's going on, and it's not a different place. It's not a different city that it happens in. It's not different people. It's us here. And to be honest, I found some amazing characters and amazing friends in that world. The women I worked with and some of the men I worked with, and we grew very close and affectionate. There was a lot of loyalty and a lot of respect, I think, that people don't tend to expect.
So what made you choose to leave it?
Oh, well, I went overseas. I really needed to get away from Melbourne to get myself together after having come off the drugs. So I stopped using heroin in January, and I did methadone and then something called buprenorphine at the very end. And in September I left, like literally 2 days after I finished the treatment. So I knew I just needed to get away and get myself together, because I was very frail by that stage and very tired. And so I picked up and I went overseas for nearly a year. And had a whole lot of other adventures and problems. And then I came back, and I did a little bit of sex work when I came back, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. And I actually felt it wasn't right to do it, to take people's money if I wasn't, you know, going to be comfortable doing it. And it wasn't because I thought it was wrong, it was because I was tired. I didn't feel so confident in my body. I was in love with a boy in Italy. I didn't want to, you know, be doing things with other people, even professionally. I just had lost my momentum, I guess, and like a lot of other jobs, it just wasn't for me anymore. I did always think, well, one of these days, if I'm ever really hard up, I can go back there. And I used to think about running a place. But
do you still think that?
I would think it would be a great thing to do, because I paid a lot of attention to how a good business would be run under those circumstances and the mistakes that people made. And I thought it would be a great thing to do, but it's very rigorous. You have to have a whole lot of checking and paperwork, and you know, it's surprisingly bureaucratic.
Right, okay.
Considering I can't even make an appointment on time at the moment or write an email, I think perhaps I might wait.
Right. Chapter of your life, in that period and the choices you made, as you left it and started a new chapter of your life. And obviously now you have a partner, you have a baby, you're a writer, you're
very
a columnist.
Respectable.
Yeah, you're very respectable.
Very respectable, very suburban.
Yeah, very suburban. Well, you're not that suburban, you're in East St Kilda.
Yeah.
That's all. You know, I think you go further out to get to the suburbs. But so just as far as where was that confronting for you as you had to deal with, you know, the Kate that found herself in that place in the first place?
Well, I didn't ever expect I was going to be introduced on a stage in front of hundreds of people as former prostitute and heroin addict, you know, Kate Holden. That's kind of the most weird thing about it. I'm not ashamed of it. It's just it sounds harsh. So I had no problem at all coming out of that experience. Even at the time, I would tell them, getting a taxi home from my shift at the brothel, I'd say, well, you know, while I'm working. I figured instantly that there was nothing to be had out of pretending it hadn't happened. And a lot of people who have used drugs especially and get off them do like to close the lid on that and put it behind them and move on. And I really understand that, because I think there is so much judgment, and people can feel very embarrassed about what's happened. And I suppose it's a way of also saying to themselves, that whole part of my life is done, and I don't want to have any risks.
I don't want to carry that past into my future, so I don't want even people to know I had that past.
Yeah, and there's no danger there that I'm ever going to go back, and they shut the door really firmly. But for me, I just felt very much that it would be such a waste. I'd lose all the lessons I'd learned, and I had learned so much. And I have the scars to prove it, literally, and I had learnt so much to be proud of in myself, I think. Really, I discovered I could be such a terrible person. It's the most clarifying experience, being at that very extreme end of survival and need when you're a really serious user.
What we can do when we are that desperate.
What I could do, I could lie, I could steal, I could scream in my mother's face, I could be so cold, I could be so ruthless, just that dedicated need. The things I was capable of doing were frightening, but they were also very good to know about. I mean, it was better to know that they were there than not. But then I also discovered I had all these, not to be vain, but I discovered I had really strong good qualities. So I was a decent person. I tried very hard to maintain my respect for other people and minimise the harm I caused, and to behave honestly and with integrity. And as I worked in the brothels, I really got to feel that I was practising good things. And I thought it would be a terrible waste to leave all of that behind.
Yeah, so I think there's something, what I love about who you are is that you just own all of who you are, and you own all of your story without that shame. And I know I had bulimia through my teens and early 20s, and worked through it with a psychologist, and then it flared up again when I moved to Papua New Guinea, I was telling you earlier, and I know I was very shameful about it. I didn't want anyone to know that I had, nowadays kind of go, everybody talks about it so easily, but at the time I was so embarrassed, and I was shameful. I felt shamed about it. But I know for me, when I actually wrote my first book, I just wrote all about having this journey of having bulimia. And to me, it was so freeing just being open and honest. Like, if I met anyone, there's no one that I'd be embarrassed to say I had it. I mightn't share it because it just might be completely irrelevant to the conversation. And every now and again, people will respond and go, "Oh, you did? Like, wow. Oh, I can't believe you're so open about that." And obviously having bulimia and being a sex worker is like, they're on a spectrum, and sex work's further up this end. But I just love that, just owning it. It's like, you know what? All of us do things at times.
Oh, exactly.
That we mightn't have ever planned to do, or that we wouldn't choose to, that we ideally, mightn't have been part of our story if we were starting out.
No, absolutely. And and if you come out with it first, then no one can sneak up behind you and say, "I know all this stuff about you. I know all the dirt."
I agree.
What dirt? No dirt. There's no dirt. And I have to say, look, working in brothels, once you've seen a whole lot of really naked, paunchy men, you just really understand that humans are vulnerable, and we've all got problems, and it actually makes you like humans more in a way. You just think we're all trying so hard.
Very levelling. At the end of the day, I know even in my work, I meet sometimes people who are extraordinarily successful or famous in one area, or people who are struggling. At the end of the day, we are all so much more alike than we are different. And we can dress ourselves and sort of separate ourselves because the brand of clothing we wear, or the car we drive, or the suburb we live in, or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, we all struggle with the same things.
Everyone's got bottoms. Everyone puts their socks on one at a time. I just really like that. I like that kind of feeling of community and collegiality. And also, who's to judge anyone, really? And everyone has little secret sly needs. And what I guess I also took was that so many people that you'd never imagine really beat themselves up and are shy, insecure, self-hating about things that everyone else would say, "Don't be stupid, you're lovely." But the most confident-looking person, the most prestigious premium guy out there, can actually be completely upset about his little paunchy tummy, and wish that no one would ever notice it. And that actually, what's so lovely is when you see someone come to terms with the way they treat themselves, the bad way they treat themselves, and forgive themselves, and let it go. I just think that's so beautiful.